Hey everybody, so it is Thanksgiving today, and I thought there was no better way to celebrate Thanksgiving than to look at the life of somebody who embodied radical gratitude. That might not sound like super exciting, but just wait until you hear some of the things that this saint, her name is Saint Faustina. I think that's the right way to pronounce it. I've got Jimmy Akin with me today, and he can correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation here. But I wanted to look at her life. I mean, it was actually a very short life that she lived, but she had a profound impact on a whole lot of people, including the Catholic Church itself. But we're gonna get into some of those details. There was I was looking up like who would be a good person to look at for Thanksgiving, because this is Thanksgiving. You know, we want to embody thankfulness and gratitude and stuff on this day. We want to think about that. But I wanted to look at the life of someone who was just like all of those things and more. And I came across Saint Faustina a few days ago. I reached out to Jimmy and I was like, hey, let's look into this. If you'd be willing to come on the show, we could talk about her and some of the things that she said. We're going to get into those things very soon. But I wanted to give Jimmy an opportunity to introduce himself to my audience because he's never been on the channel before. But and this is actually the first time that he and I have talked. So I'm really excited to be able to do this today with you, Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've very much appreciated your work on YouTube, Cameron, and it's a delight to be here. I also really liked that countdown animation. I mean, it's like from the Terminator movies. It's like iridescent liquid shifting metal. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of people actually like comment on the countdown, not necessarily like the way that it looks, but the music. They really like the music, even though I cut it out and post on the back end of YouTube. But yeah. Well, tell me,
very nice, very relaxing music,
Jimmy. So let the audience know, because you're a Catholic apologist over at Catholic Answers, but inform the audience a little bit more. Like, tell me something that you've never told anyone. On YouTube.
I would have to think about that. Well, let's see. Something I don't think I've told people on YouTube is I have phone numbers of former government psychic spies on my cell phone.
What?
Yeah. So the government back between the 70s and the 90s had a psychic spying program. They were trying to use psychic functioning to spy on the Russians and the Chinese and drug smugglers and terrorists. And it's all declassified now, and they're out in public. And I have talked to them on the phone and interviewed them for my podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
That is crazy. Well, let's do a more like traditional introduction. So just inform the audience. Yeah, because my audience, this is the first time they might be seeing you. So who are you?
Okay, so my name is Jimmy Akin, and I was born in Texas. I grew up in Arkansas, and I am a Christian apologist and a Catholic apologist, and I've worked professionally as an apologist for 27 years now. I work at Catholic Answers in San Diego. Our website is Catholic.com if you want to learn more about them. I regularly, do interviews. I do open forums where people can ask me on the radio questions about anything they'd like. And it's pretty broadly focused when I do it, not just questions about the Catholic faith or the Christian faith more broadly, but also questions about science or philosophy or things like that. I'm a pretty curious guy. And so over the last almost 30 years of working as an apologist, I've picked up a lot of information about things that are relevant to the faith in one way or another. And I try to push the envelope of Christian apologetics by learning about other disciplines and bringing in information from science or history that's not currently part of the discussion, but that hopefully will be of use to people and that will be of use to future apologists.
Excellent. So you never did you start out as a Catholic? Did I miss that part of your? Were you like?
No, I was raised nominally Protestant. My parents took me to the Church of Christ until I was about 6 or 7, and then they quit going. And that was actually okay with me because in the South, in that day and age, going to church was a very formal thing. So for me, the experience I had of going to church very young was you had to wear this itchy, tight, hot suit and go and listen to a guy yell for about an hour. And that wasn't something that appealed to me as a child. And so it was actually okay when they quit going. And then after that, I was nominally Protestant. And when I was in my teenage years, I had a flirtation with the New Age movement. But then at age 20, I had a really profound conversion to Christ. And I decided I wanted to devote my life to the study of his word and to the teaching of his word. And my plan was to become a Protestant seminary professor and possibly pastor as well. And I was on that track, but various things happened that I ended up being diverted from that track. And in the end, one of the things I had done since my conversion at age 20 was I had made a point of studying the theology of all different branches of Christendom, because there were tons and tons of churches in my hometown in Arkansas. But I realized that what church is within convenient driving distance, or what church has music I like, or what church has preaching I like, was not a test of theological truth. And what was important to me is what's true. And so I made a point of reading Baptist theology, Pentecostal theology, Wesleyan theology, Catholic theology, Orthodox theology, Presbyterian theology. I tried to study everybody's theology so I would understand the shape of Christian thought, and within that would be able to arrive at the best understanding of God and his word. And in the end, I concluded that was Catholic. And so I became Catholic, and I've been Catholic ever since.
What around what age would you say? Because it sounded like you were at around 20 is when you started your investigation. So how long was that investigation, and then you became Catholic?
7 years.
7 years. Okay.
And based on, we were having a little conversation just before we went live, and I mentioned, because you were asking about the stuffed animals here in my office, those are my wife's stuffed animals. I'm a widower, and those were hers. And so I've kept them all these years as in memory of her. And she passed away also when I was 27. Actually, I was received into the Catholic Church in her hospital room using the emergency shortened form of the rites 4 days before she died.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that the timeline seems like it would be right around the time that she passed. And again, I'm so sorry that happened. I know that it was a little while ago now.
Well, yeah, it was extremely hard at the time, but God is good and life is good and time heals. And as a Christian, I know I'll see her again. So that's a great comfort.
And I was thinking today about so getting kind of to the topic of what we're talking about today, this might be a nice little segue, is that Saint Faustina, that's the person that we're looking at. Let me go ahead and just pull up her picture on the screen. Obviously, this is not a picture. This is a painting of her. And she lived 1905 to 1938. But we're gonna talk about her life a little bit and some of the things that she wrote about when it comes to gratitude. So she wrote on other things and said other things, but we're going to focus today on what she had to say about gratitude. What's really stuck out to me, Jimmy, as I was reading her thoughts on gratitude, it was basically a prayer, I think, from her diary to God. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of us, when we think about gratitude, we think that we're going to thank God for the nice things in our lives. We're going to thank God for our health. We're going to thank God for the house that we live in, for the cars that we might have, for the money that we might have, for all the nice things. Those are the things, or like our families. Those are the things that we naturally sort of are inclined to thank God for. But I was reading this one prayer, or one of these diary entries from Saint Faustina, and it just blew my mind how she was thanking God, and she was listing I think it was 20 different things, 20 different sufferings that she was going through at the time. and I think she died from tuberculosis, was it, or something like that?
That's the running theory. They apparently didn't have a rigorous diagnosis of her when she was alive, but it is generally understood that it was tuberculosis, or what they used to call consumption. And for people who may not be aware, it's a respiratory disease. It's caused by microorganisms that nest in your lungs and over time interfere with your breathing, and so it gradually saps you of your energy, and it produces actually a very peaceful death. But it was rampant in prior centuries, and a lot of people died from it in the early 20th century, and they didn't have an effective treatment for it. The best they could do for you was send you to a warmer, drier climate, and it was thought that moving to a warmer, drier climate might help. And so you had actually a lot of people move to places like Colorado and California, here in the United States, who had tuberculosis. It unfortunately didn't help a whole lot. It might slow down the progress of the disease, and not everybody could just up sticks and move. So that wasn't an option for everybody. Eventually, we got antibiotics, and so far, antibiotics have been able to treat it much more effectively.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad to know that, actually. But why don't we get into some of the details on what she actually had to say about gratitude? So I've got it pulled up. I can read it, or you can read it. I think you know which one I'm talking about, the diary entry on how she was thanking God for all the suffering. But
possibly,
is there anything?
Since you're more familiar with it, why don't you read it?
Sure. So I've got it right here, and I should have had this on the screen, but I can just read it out for you guys. And you can also look it up. So if you just search for Saint Faustina, then it's going to pop up, like Saint Faustina gratitude. It's going to pop up immediately. So she says, Jesus, I thank you for little daily crosses, for opposition to my endeavors. Like every one of these lines, just, okay, for opposition to my endeavors, for the hardships of communal life, for the misinterpretation of my intentions. She's thanking God for these things, for humiliations at the hands at the hands of others, for the harsh way in which we are treated, for false suspicions, for poor health and loss of strength, for self-denial, for dying to myself, for lack of recognition in everything, for the upsetting of all my plans. How someone can be thankful for those things. Maybe I just never thought about gratitude in this sort of extreme, like radical way. And is that even, the question I want to ask, is that radical? Like, should it be radical to us, or should this be normal to us?
Well, so I think the answer is twofold. On the one hand, it is natural to not be grateful for bad things when bad things happen to us. Bad things, by definition, are evil. I'm sure your audience is familiar, given how much philosophy you cover on your channel, I'm sure your audience is familiar with the distinction between moral evil, which is sin, and physical evil, which is all evil that is not moral. So pain, suffering, death, all of those are physical evils because they're bad things that happen to us. And it is not human nature to be grateful for bad things that happen to us. But there is a greater perspective from which we can be thankful, even for the bad things. We see an example of this in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, where the apostles are being persecuted for preaching the gospel. The Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council in Jerusalem, is persecuting them, and they thank God that they have been accounted worthy of suffering for the fate of the gospel. And so even though they are suffering, they've taken this within the Christian perspective and are recognizing the role that even bad things can have in God's plan and in his overall design. And of course, we know his overall design works for good. And so even if something bad happens, God will bring something good out of it. In fact, in the Catholic tradition of Christianity, it's understood that God would not permit an evil to occur if he wasn't going to bring about an equal or greater good out of that very evil thing. And the classic example of this is Jesus himself. It's his death on the cross that brought about the redemption of the world. Of course, killing the Son of God is an evil thing, but nevertheless, God used that evil act to bring about enormous good for all of mankind. And in the same way, he does that with our own sufferings, with the evil things that occur to us in life. And so the apostles knew that God would bring about good as a result of the sufferings they experienced, and they also counted themselves fortunate that God deemed them worthy of being able to handle that situation and being able to suffer for the kingdom in a way that would advance it. And so they were able to be grateful even when they were beaten. I mean, physically beaten for the sake of the gospel. We can also see how just on the natural level, suffering actually plays a positive role. We have nerves in our bodies known as nociceptors, and they are the nerves that are designed to help us feel pain. And actually, even though pain itself is not fun, those nociceptors help us. They help us navigate our environment in a safe way. There are people who are born without a sense of pain, and they have to be really careful because if they put their hand on a hot stove, it doesn't bug them. They don't instinctively yank it back, and they can burn themselves and cut themselves and physically injure themselves because they don't have a sense of pain. What pain is meant to do in God's plan is alert us when something is wrong so that we can try to take steps to take care of it. It's not always possible to do that. There are some situations where we're just kind of trapped, but that's the basic function of pain, both physical pain and emotional pain. Emotions like fear, that's painful, that's unpleasant. But if we have fear that we might lose our job or fear that we might lose our spouse, that will motivate us to take steps to ensure that those even worse things don't happen. And so even though pain is no fun, it is actually something God uses for our good. And so from that perspective, we can, as Christians, recognize that God is allowing us to experience sufferings to help us in many cases, to help us improve the situation for ourselves or for others, or even if we are in one of those situations where we're just kind of trapped and there's nothing immediately we can do about a source of suffering, God can still and will bring about a greater good as a result of it. And so in some mystical way that we won't understand in this life, but that we presumably will understand in heaven, God is able to take even the sufferings we can't escape and use them to bring about a greater good. St. Paul is a great example of this. He talks about in Colossians, he uses a bit of hyperbole here. He says, I fill up in my own body what is lacking in the sufferings of Christ for the sake of his church. And obviously there's nothing lacking in the sufferings of Christ. But what Paul's talking about is how he uses his travels and his ministry, which involved suffering, because travel was very difficult back then. The only thing worse than travel back then was taking a plane today. I don't have a high opinion of taking a plane these days. But back then, travel was very dangerous. He encountered a lot of opposition. He encountered a lot of physical suffering. At times, he was jailed and beaten and thrown out of cities or was in danger of his life. But nevertheless, through all those sufferings, he spread the gospel and he advanced the kingdom of Christ. And that's what he's talking about. And so there is this Christian perspective on suffering that allows us to be thankful when we encounter suffering, like the apostles did, not saying, yay, pain is fun, but recognizing that even though pain is not fun, God can and will use it to bring about good, and we can be thankful for that.
Man, so this brings up a whole lot of I was thinking about the same thing as well. So I want to make a distinction between reality and psychology. So the reality of the situation is, as Christians, as theists, we think that God has a good reason for allowing and permitting the suffering that we endure. And I know that. Like, I have a really good theodicy, at least I think I've got a good theodicy, a reason why God does things or allows and permits suffering, and that's called the soul building theodicy. That's my favorite theodicy. I think that covers basically any kind of suffering that could happen. Yet, psychologically, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I was like, yeah, I need to thank God for this suffering right now. And so I was thinking just psychologically, like, why is that the case? Like, even though I've got this, the way that I view reality is such that God has a good reason for allowing and permitting this. Yet, I've never gone so far as to like thank God for my suffering. I've been like, yes, I understand that this suffering is like necessary for some good. I understand that, but I've never gone the extra step to like thank God for it, and to express gratitude for that suffering. And I feel like I should, if I actually believe this thing, then I should be open to doing that. My psychology, like I shouldn't let that get in the way. And that's part of the reason why I wanted people to really tune in today, is because this is I think it's gonna help you sort of just get through life better. If you can have this view where you're merging reality and psychology together, then you're going to be able to get through your daily life, I think, a whole lot better. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, common sense, I think you're absolutely right. Common sense would suggest that if, you are able to cultivate gratitude as one of your dispositions, that you will be happier, because gratitude is a positive emotion. And even if it can be difficult to say thank you when we encounter some suffering, to the extent that we can promote genuine gratitude, it's something that will make people happier. And so that is a nice pivot actually to psychology, because just in the last few decades, there has been a lot of study of psychology in psychology of gratitude, and their findings confirm Christian common sense. And so I hope to be able to talk about that a little bit, because I think it will be of real practical benefit to people. One of the things, and this is also something that our instincts would tell us, but one of the things that psychologists have done in studying gratitude is they've distinguished between two different things: indebtedness and gratitude. Now, in both indebtedness and gratitude, we recognize that someone has done something good for us. If someone gives you a new car, well, that's a good thing, but there are different ways of reacting to that. You could have a reaction where you feel indebted to the person, or you could have a reaction where you feel grateful to the person. The grateful reaction is positive and will lead you to do positive things with respect to that person. If someone's done something good for you and you're grateful, you want to be around that person. You want to build your relationship with that person. You want to say thanks to that person. You want to do things to make that person feel good because they've made you feel good. And that's the grateful reaction. The other reaction, indebtedness, is a negative emotion. Someone gives you a new car and you feel, oh, now I'm indebted to this person. Now I'm going to have to do things that will please them. Maybe I don't want to be around them as much. Maybe I want to avoid them because I don't want that feeling of indebtedness to them to be pressed into my face when I'm around them. So maybe I steer away from this person. Maybe I try to minimize contact and minimize my relationship with this person. And so it's important to recognize out of the gate that there are these two different reactions that we can have whenever someone does something good for us. And it can apply to other human beings. It can also apply to God. People can say, oh, God has given me so much, and if I let myself think about how much he's given me, I'm going to feel indebted to him. This is part of our brokenness because of original sin. And maybe I need to think less about God, because otherwise I'll have to change my life and maybe do some things that would be more pleasing to God than what I'm doing right now. And so there is this choice that has to be made between a genuinely grateful reaction that would lead us to feel positive and build our relationship with God, and the negative reaction, which could actually push us away from God. So that's a danger spiritually to be aware of. But if we are able to cultivate gratitude, it produces a lot of psychological benefits, including health benefits, because you get those endorphins going. You're feeling more positive. There's just been a lot of study of this kind of thing, and there are some practical ways that people can do this. Now, one of the things, and this is just, you asked for something I'd never told people on YouTube before, and psychic spies on my phone happened to be the first thing that occurred to me because it was a little
Still
startling.
don't know why that was the first thing that came up.
Well, but another thing I haven't talked about to people on YouTube, certainly not this particular detail of it, is I have a prayer that I try to say every day, and I try to say the Lord's Prayer, and then I also have this personal prayer that I've been crafting, and I revise it over time. But part of it, and in fact, the first thing in it is I say, "Thank you, God," and I'm praying not just for myself, but I try to pray for everybody in the world and throughout history. So I try to make this a global or even cosmic prayer. Just you know, I'm praying to God on behalf of everybody, including myself, and I say, "Thank you, God, for all of the graces in our lives, the natural and especially the supernatural." And the reason I put that first is because it's so easy for us to not be grateful. It's so easy for us to be wrapped up in the affairs of our lives and solving problems and dealing with issues and thinking about, things down on earth. It's easy for us, even when we turn to God, to not be thankful and to simply ask him for stuff, because that's one of our natural impulses, is to just say, please help me with this, and please help this other person with that, and please help us in the following ways. And we don't recognize the way that God has already helped us. And so, as part of my personal prayer, before I ask for anything, I try to make a point of saying thank you. And I thank him for the two different things, for the natural graces he gives us. This, includes things like food and health and companionship, but it also includes, and I say, and especially the supernatural graces, because the supernatural graces are the ones that will get us to heaven, the ones that go beyond this life and will give us an eternal relationship with God. So it's great to have food and health and things like that, and friends in this life, but it's even greater to get to heaven and have the eternal banquet and God himself and heavenly friends and all of the glories that await us in the next life. Because, as you know, St. Paul says the sufferings in this life aren't even worth comparing to the glory that is in store for us. And so I want to make sure that before I do anything else and asking God for anything, I want to thank him for the graces he's already given us. And that's a practical way that I try to do it in my prayer. I some days I forget to say this prayer, or things like that, but that's something I try to do. But there are additional practical things. Recently I've been doing some reading on the psychological studies of gratitude, and a couple of practical tips leapt out at me. One of them involved a set of studies where people would write a thank you letter to someone they know, and just tell the person what they are grateful for, what this person has done for them. And then they would go and give it to that person. And the people who did this, as opposed to the people who didn't write a letter in the control group, had a very positive experience, that it really helped their mood. It helped build their relationship with this person, and it helped them with some longer term benefits. And so I said to myself, I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick one or more people that I know and who would receive the letter well. You don't want it, someone you barely know would find it creepy if you sent them a thank you letter. But I'm going to take someone I know, someone who I appreciate, and out of the blue, I'm going to send them a thank you message, and I'm going to spend some time on it. It won't just be a quick text of, hey, I really appreciate everything you do, thanks. It'll be more detailed than that. I'll talk about the things, the good qualities that the person has and how they've helped me and how much I value our relationship, and then I'll present it to them. And I decided I'm going to do that today on Thanksgiving. So one of the ways I'm going to be honoring Thanksgiving today is writing one or more thank you letters to people I know. Now, that's a practical way of directing thanks to other people here on earth. But obviously, God is the source of all blessings. And so we want to be thankful to him. And one way of doing that, obviously we can do that through prayer, but one way of helping make that concrete is another practice that has actually been studied in recent psychological studies. It's keeping a gratitude journal. Now, you mentioned St. Faustina's diary, which is very famous. It records her mystical conversations with Jesus and her prayers and other things. People can get a copy of it on Amazon. It's even available like really inexpensively in Kindle if people just want to download it and read it. But she lists things that she's grateful for in the course of the diary. And what psychologists have found is that people will also benefit if they just keep a simple gratitude diary or gratitude journal where every day they think about what benefits they've had that they're grateful for, and they list 3 of them. And so in one of these studies, what the psychologists did was they took people and they said, okay, in the test group, as opposed to the control group, we want you for 1 week, so just a week, we want you to write down 3 things that you're thankful for every day for a week. And they found some very interesting findings. One of them was that 6 months later, when they followed up, to even after the experiment, the 1 week experiment is over, they followed up 6 months later, and they found out that people 6 months later were still having benefits like an improved mood and improved health and things like that, whereas the control group didn't. They also found that many people who were their test subjects found this exercise so helpful in improving their mood and their relationships and everything else that they decided on their own to keep up a gratitude diary on an ongoing basis, even after the experiment was over. And so it struck me, those are both really good practical techniques that people could use to cultivate gratitude and all the positive, warm feelings that are associated with it. Keeping a gratitude journal can give us material. Not only is it good to reawaken our sense of gratitude and make us feel good in that way, it also can give us material for when we're talking to God in prayer, so that we can say, oh yeah, I don't want to just say thanks in general. Thank you for this. This is something I've been thinking about. It's in my prayer journal. I've got this whole list of things. Thank you for that. Thank you for all those things that I've been thinking about. And then also on so gratitude on the vertical level, but then gratitude on the horizontal level, writing a letter, taking the time to write a letter of gratitude to someone or more than one person. You think about who you could write that to. You could write it to your spouse. You could write it to one of your children. You can write it to a friend. You could write it to your pastor. There are lots of people that have done good things in your life. Some of them may not have heard, you may not have been in contact with them in years, but they did something back then that really made a difference for you, and you could write them a letter now and send it to them and express your gratitude to them for what they did.
There was so much there to talk about. I want to, first I want to ask you, do you have any plans for Thanksgiving?
Well, I've got this interview scheduled with Cameron Bertuzzi this morning, and then after that, I'm going to probably order some Himalayan food for dinner and do other things. But I'm going to be writing my gratitude letter.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Himalayan food. What is that? I've never even heard of that.
Well,
what kind of food is it?
Well, it's the Himalayas, kind of straddle India and Nepal and a little bit of China and places like that, and
Mm-hmm.
so and a little bit of Mongolia, so they share a common culture and in our aspects of a common culture. And Himalayan food is kind of like, if you think Indian food, it's a
Okay.
lot like Indian food, and so I'll probably order rice and flatbread and lamb vindaloo, which is a spiced lamb dish. You
Sounds
get
awesome.
chunks of lamb in this spicy gravy, and you put that over the rice and stuff. And then they use mint sauce, and they also
Hmm.
have these really great fried vegetable fritters called kulchas. And it's like they have these vegetables in batter, and then they throw them in a deep fryer, and you get this wonderful crunchy vegetable thing to eat.
You're making me way too hungry. I skipped breakfast this morning, and I'm dying here. So
Oh, sorry. Well, hey, the good news. So I do intermittent fasting. I do one meal a day,
okay.
except on Sundays because it's the Lord's Day, because I want to celebrate it. But I do one meal a day fasting, and the good news is that once you get used to it, which only takes a few days, it turns out hunger is just a matter of habit. When your body when your body is used to getting food, your body thinks, oh, this is the time of day when food is available. We should turn on the hunger signal so he doesn't forget to eat. But then after a few days where you're not eating at that time, your body says, oh, I guess food isn't available at this time of day anymore. We may as well not bug him with the hunger. And it goes away. And I was delighted when I discovered intermittent fasting, because I had struggled with my weight for decades, and it finally put me in charge of my weight. And I realized just how much hunger is a habit. One Saturday morning, I realized I had spent all Saturday morning watching cooking videos on YouTube just because I was curious about the techniques, and I had not been hungry once.
And then you just realized that it had had
I
the effect on you that
yeah, it's a matter. Hunger is a matter of habit. You get hungry when you are used to eating, or you get mildly hungry for a few minutes when your body is shifting over from burning the food you've already consumed to burning fat. And so I would typically eat one meal a day in the evening, and then the next morning I would be hungry for, a little hungry, not bad, but a little hungry for like 10 minutes or so, as my body was shifting from burning last night's meal into burning body fat.
Mhm.
And if you're interested, or if people are interested in more about this, they can go to my personal website. If they go to Jimmy Akin, and you got to spell it right to get there, Jimmy, and the last name is far easier than people think. There are no E's or T's or S's in it. It is just four letters, Akin. So if you go to jimmyakin.com/fast, FAST, you'll find a bunch of resources that I collected after I got into intermittent fasting, and all the benefits it has, and how I transitioned onto it in a way that made it much easier than going cold turkey, no food.
Cold turkey. How about that for a pun? So, um, my sister is a nutritionist, and she's actually writing a book, or she's written a book on intermittent fasting. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's turn back to. Well, there's two things I want to talk about, and then I think we'll close out the show for today. So let's turn back to Faustina, Saint Faustina, and I'll read one more quote from her. It says, "I thank you, Jesus, who first drank the cup of bitterness before you gave it to me in a much milder form." So she's saying that obviously the suffering that she's enduring is a whole lot less than what Jesus endured. I want to drink the cup to its last drop and not seek to know the reason why. In you, O Lord, is all good. All is a gift of your paternal heart. I do not prefer consolations over bitterness or bitterness over consolations, but thank you, O Jesus, for everything. Again, awesome. Just so good. I mean, and that's another thing that's so difficult. I know that there are studies that show that, like, when you can just give a person who's like in the hospital or suffering some kind of illness that they don't know what the illness is, if you can just give them the name of the illness, it like goes so far into just helping them get better. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, a sort of natural thing that we want is to know the reason why for everything. We want to know the name of it. We want to know, we just want to know. And she's saying here, I thank you that I'm not going to seek the reason why. I'm just going to trust that you're good. And I think that actually points to the fact that in my own case, when it comes to my own psychology, and maybe a lot of people watching this as well, is that what you're doing is you're not convinced. Maybe convinced is the wrong word. You may not be convinced of God's goodness. Like that may be the thing that you're struggling with.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, so she's a saint. So she's taking these Christian reactions to a degree that is heroic, that is beyond what most of us do. But notice these are legitimate Christian approaches to things. What she says here in this passage you just read resonates with St. Paul's instruction to be thankful in all things. Well, he said all because he meant all. No matter what circumstance you're in, St. Paul thinks that there's something you can be grateful for. And she's just trying to enact that. And she's able to do it. Now, this is something that that I'd like to explain it a little briefly because I think it may help people. So people may be familiar, they may or may not, but they may be familiar with a common saying that you'll hear in the Catholic Church, in Catholic families in particular, when someone is suffering. And you may hear, like, if a child is feeling bad or something like that, the mom may say to the child, offer it up, or offer it up to Jesus. And there's a question that people have of, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to offer a suffering up to God or to Jesus? And the basic idea is actually something, even though the language is not familiar to Protestants, typically the concept will be. Basically, when you are suffering in some way, you deal with it, and you try to deal with it as a Christian, and you hope that's pleasing to God. And then, since you know that God can bring good out of evil, even if you don't understand the mechanics of how that happens, you can still turn to God in prayer and say, Father, I'm suffering right now. I'm trying to deal with it in a way that would please you. If I please you by how I deal with this suffering, then please help me or help others or bring good out of this in some way, even if I don't understand or know how that is. And that's what's meant by offering up a suffering to God. It's saying, Lord, if I please you with how I deal with this, please help people. And we have confidence, and that's thoroughly biblical. We have, we have examples of the principles that underlie that, especially in the New Testament. And we can have confidence that God will bring a redemptive or healing or positive aspect even to the sufferings in our own lives. And that's essentially what St. Faustina is doing in this passage. She's making a radical act of entrustment to God and saying, God, I'm going to trust you with this. I'm not even going to ask why this suffering is in my life, but I'm going to trust you to bring good out of it.
There's one last thing I want to...
That's heroic. It is okay to say, God, if it's your will, could I maybe one day understand the reason for this? That's okay to ask.
Yeah, and I think that she's probably operating on the assumption that, like, one day we will know.
Yeah, and she also knows she's going to find out sooner than most of us because she was dying of tuberculosis.
So there's one last thing I want to discuss with you before we close it out, and I do have to go because I'm currently actively smoking a turkey, and so I've got to go check on it soon here. Yeah. This is my first time to do this, by the way. So
good, and there's not a lot of nicotine in turkeys, so you should be okay.
Oh, good. I've smoked chickens and I've smoked pork, but I've yet to smoke a turkey. So I assume that poultry is all kind of similar. So I've it's been in a brine, I seasoned it really well, got some vegetables inside of it, so it's currently smoking. It's awesome, looks so good, but I do
Uh-huh.
need to go check on it in just a little bit.
Sure.
So there's one last thing that I was thinking about as you were talking earlier. This was back toward the beginning of the show, but there was at our recent conference that we did, Capturing Christianity, CCV1. We had one of our speakers was Liz Jackson, and she talked on the axiology of theism, sort of the category of the talk that she gave. But basically, she argued that we should want God to exist, and one of the reasons that she gave for that was suffering. She said, if you're a theist, then you like the reason, there is a reason why there's suffering going on if you're a theist. But if you're an atheist, there is no reason, right? So she basically contrasted theism and atheism and said that if you just look at it from like, if you back out and look at how these two worldviews sort of address the problem of evil, then you're going to, well, at least she argues this, right? So if you want to go watch the talk, you can go watch it. But she argues that we should prefer theism as it relates to the problem of evil. And so I was thinking about that in terms of gratitude and how it seems like the theist has more opportunities for gratitude here than the atheist does, right? The atheist, why would they be grateful for their suffering?
Who are they going to be? Who would an atheist be grateful to? I mean, obviously they can be grateful to other human beings, but for the good things that happen in their lives that are not produced by human agency, there's no one to be grateful to. And so, yeah, Christians do have a more positive worldview in this respect. And I've made the same point myself. I have a talk on the problem of evil that I recorded a number of years ago. It's available on DVD at Catholic.com. But one of the final points I make in talking about the problem of evil is if you adopt a Christian worldview with respect to evil, you've got hope. There's an explanation. You're going to be more than compensated for evils you suffer in this life. As St. Paul said, the sufferings of this life aren't worth comparing to what we're going to receive. So you get to be compensated in the next life for evils. There will be a reason why they were allowed in your life, so it will make sense. And if you adopt an atheist perspective on this, where we're just meat machines and life is meaningless and it's all driven ultimately by random chance rather than by a loving plan, well, then guess what? You've still got all the evils and they have no meaning and they will never be redeemed and there is not a reason for them and you are not going to be compensated. You get all of the evil and you still get all of the evil and none of the benefits.
Right. Yeah, it does kind of pose a problem, I think, especially if you go watch the talk, because she argues that this is it can actually preferring theism, like wanting it to be true. There are some situations where when you have two competing theories where you've got evidence kind of for both and you're kind of undecided which one to go for. If you're like, say you're an agnostic, you're a perfect agnostic on both sides of this, then in some situations, like in religiously neutral situations, it can be rational to go with the theory that you want to be true when your evidence is sort of equal on both sides. And then she applies that to religious cases as well.
Yeah, and that's the kind of practical reasoning that Pascal uses in his wager, and this is essentially another form of that. If you're torn between the two positions and you can't decide between them based on the evidence, then use self-interest. Now, Pascal used self-interest partly in terms of gaining heaven in the next life, although also partly in terms of the benefits that you'll receive in this life, because he points out that if you do choose to be a Christian rather than a skeptic, that you will be made humble and you're going to acquire all these virtues and you'll be happier even in this life. And this is essentially another version of the same thing. I would also point to, so from an evolutionary perspective, now, if someone is in this situation where they say, okay, well, I evolution is equally compatible with there being a God or there not being a God, but for one reason or another, whether God caused it or there is no God and he didn't cause it, humans evolved to be religious. Religion is a human universal. It appears in every culture, at every point in history. Whenever people have attempted to make a non-religious culture, it has failed. This is something deeply rooted in human nature, and simply from an evolutionary perspective, that would suggest it's good for us that we evolved in this direction. Whether God is responsible for evolution or not, there was some kind of benefit that we receive from being religious. And so that is itself something that if you're equally torn on evidential grounds, go with your human nature and be religious. It's there for a reason. Whether God put it there or blind chance put it there, it's for your good. Ultimately, statistically, with all the proper qualifiers, just go with your nature.
And if you want more, go check out that talk from our conference Liz Jackson gave. It was titled, "Should We Want God to Exist?" I think that was the title of it. So if you want to get more detail on that, just go check it out. So yeah, I think that's going to do it for us today. This has been really fun. Hopefully it's been insightful to the audience as well. I hope you gained something out of this today. I know that I did when I was just reading through her diaries myself. So hopefully that her work has also inspired you. There's been some people in the comments have said that I titled this video too strong because I said Protestants need to know about this Catholic saint. But I want to defend that. Like, I think that you should know about her because when you understand her views on gratitude, and you said I think you're right in saying that it was heroic. Her the level of gratitude, I called it radical, but heroic I think is even a better term. So understand.
Incidentally, that's the term that's used in the canonization process in the Catholic Church. One of the early stages before someone's a saint is it is established they lived a life of what's called heroic virtue, and this would be an example of heroic virtue.
Yeah, and I think that Protestants, and the reason why I want to defend it is because it's not just Protestants that need to know about her. I think everybody needs to know about her. And it's just so important. I mean, there's all these practical benefits we've talked about, but then, the marrying of reality and psychology, I think that's really important. So I think people need to know about St. Faustina. But is there anything that you would like to leave with the audience before we close it out?
No, I just want to thank. Oh, well, one thing I should mention, we haven't even talked about what St. Faustina is most famous for, which is the Divine Mercy devotion, which is a devotion that is focused on Jesus and the mercy that flows from him. She's actually got she has a set of prayers that are connected with the Divine Mercy devotion, which are not focused on Mary. It's kind of like a rosary, but it's focused on Jesus instead of Mary. So it may be of interest to some Protestants. The central prayer of the Divine Mercy chaplet, it's called, is talking about Jesus, and it's for the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. And so it's very focused on Jesus and his work on the cross and his passion. So people might want to check that out, or the Divine Mercy devotion in general. Wikipedia has some articles on not just St. Faustina, but also the Divine Mercy devotion. So people can easily find that if they would like to look up more. If people would like to look up more about me, like I said, I work for Catholic Answers, which is Catholic.com. People also can go to my personal website, which is jimmyakin.com. And I mentioned I have a landing page there for information about fasting. If you'd like to find out more about that, it's jimmyakin.com/fast, F-A-S-T. And also, people should check out my podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Every week we look at a new mystery. They can be natural mysteries, they can be supernatural mysteries, but we look at them from the twin perspectives of faith and reason and see what we can figure out about these different mysteries. And that podcast has proved quite popular. We've got around 100,000 listeners per episode, and it's in the top 25 documentary podcasts on Apple Podcasts here in the U.S. So check it out.
Wow. Congrats on the success on that. I also wanted to mention before we get off is that order something special for me tonight when you order your Himalayan food.
I will.
And then let me know what you got.
Okay. I'll send you a picture.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you in the next Capturing Christianity video. See you guys later. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet. I've got something super, super important to tell you. So first of all, you're awesome. Like you just watched a really, really long video just now, and you're still watching it. That is actually pretty amazing. Secondly, we have hundreds, literally hundreds of other apologetics related videos for you to watch on our channel. Go check them out. I've interviewed exorcists, hosted debates between Christians and atheists. I've even made response videos to atheists. All of that is available on our channel. Go check it out. Third, I rely on people that see value in my work, people like you that watch videos to the very end, to keep the lights on around here. Literally, this is how I feed my family.